As long as that clinic stays filled and bills enough Medicaid reimbursements and works that sort of reimbursements, we as an investor get repaid. If the people in that who go to that clinic don't get healthy, that's okay, because as long as they can keep billing Medicaid, then we all get repaid. So we are stuck in an output-based world. And what that does to us as investors, it means that our focus is on the wrong thing. Our focus is on, are you going to make sure people keep coming through, rather than what are you doing to help transform those people's lives and help them live a healthy life. And they're an amazing organization, and my team that did this well, I'm super proud of them. Because within the world we live in, we have to do what we have to do. But I can tell you from the few pockets around the country where we are getting to make investments in outcomes-oriented work, where the funding is not tied to keeping that clinic filled, but it's tied to actually making people healthy, it transforms what we focus on as investors. Because suddenly our repayment is based on the success of the people who come through that clinic and whether they become healthy or not. So we get focused on the thing we should be focused on, which is, are we, through our loans, helping organizations transform the lives of the people they work with. It's a fundamentally different role for investors, but it's also so exciting for us because we are a nonprofit. We come to work every day to make the world better, to help amazing organizations serve communities. But this outputs world we're in doesn't let us focus on that. Instead, we just have to focus on the way the money's flowing. And so the last thing is a really important point. It's easy in a room like this to get all theoretical, but ultimately we're talking about people's lives. And one of the most powerful aspects of this work is it transforms the role of the people who receive these services, who right now are basically, as long as someone shows up and there's some revenue attached to it from a government or a private funding source, then that's the role. The person who shows up in a homeless shelter, who shows up in a health clinic, they fulfill their role by showing up, even if their lives aren't turned around. In an outcomes-based world, they become the core that this whole thing is organized around. Because if their lives don't change, then the funding doesn't flow. So the nonprofit doesn't get money, the investor doesn't get money, and it fundamentally transforms the way that we provide services. Instead of saying, well, as long as you show up at my clinic and got your mental health services, you showed up over there and you got some job training, we're fine, even if none of that works. Instead, because no one's going to get paid unless that person changes their lives, it leads to coordination and flexibility in an incredibly powerful way. But also puts a lot of burdens on people around privacy. We actually have to, how are we going to know that someone's successful a year later unless we find ways to track what's happening with them? And so we have to be very thoughtful about what are we asking the most vulnerable, marginalized, and oppressed people in our society about giving up some of their privacy so that we can make this all work. And how do we do that in a way that honors their role in the system? So that's a very quick whirlwind of what's going to need to change. And what the rest of this conference is about is hearing from people who are in the middle of this, who are working with government, who are working with nonprofits from across the country, who come here to Dallas to share with you an honest conversation about not just the potential theoretically in this work, but the incredible challenges that they're facing and how they're overcoming them. And as you heard earlier, there's no point to gather together if we're not going to tell the truth. So I'm hoping we're going to have some truth-telling conversations and also learn from what you guys all are experiencing here. So thank you so much for hosting us. It's incredibly exciting for Nonprofit Finance Fund and Secretary of the Federal Reserve tonight to meet here in Dallas. And we really hope that this is the beginning for us of a much longer conversation. We'll have chances to come back and learn from and support the work you guys are all doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. And that presentation is really inspired by, let's have the panels come up. It's really inspired by Anthony's essay in the book, so if you get a chance to read that, you'll get a deeper sense of how he outlines the different roles. And so we're going to have a short conversation here, and just to open it up, though, I want to just make a few remarks. One is we've talked a little bit about this idea of changing this paradigm from outputs to outcomes. That's sort of but I want to spend like a minute talking about paradigms because that's kind of an important concept. So like a paradigm basically is a set of ideas that shape your thinking. It's very hard to step outside of a paradigm. So if for a long time people believed the Earth was the center of the universe, and if that's true, then to explain the way the stars move across the sky is that they move, So these old Greek models showed these sort of plates that would move over, and you can sort of watch these, and they're predictable and whatnot. But then Copernicus comes along and says, well, you know what? I think actually we're moving. Maybe those stars are actually in the one place, but we're moving. So it's a very different concept, and it takes a shift in consciousness, a shift in your paradigm to be able to sort of understand more fully what's actually happening, the truth of what's happening. So I'm going to two paradigms really quickly. One is differential diagnosis. This is how every doctor is trained. So a doctor is trained to look at you, look at your symptoms, and try to figure out things that look the same are actually caused by very different sources. So maybe you're experiencing some chest pain. That could be indigestion, that could be a heart attack. You know, this is the way a doctor will go through and start diagnosing what you're experiencing. Epidemiologists look at things differently. They look at things that are very different, but they have the same source. So you can sort of, if you are living under a lot of stress, you may end up dying of a heart attack, you may end up dying of some other, of a chronic disease, but there may be something that makes you more vulnerable to those diseases in the first place. And what increasingly epidemiologists, it's not a coincidence that the book is dedicated to a Berkeley epidemiologist, is that there's this understanding that these, at the source, there are these problems that are causing bad outcomes that aren't as, the connections aren't as easy to make initially. So what we are finding, what is really clear, is that poverty is something that is at root the cause of so many of the things that we are trying to fix. So if you care about education outcomes, you have to care about poverty. If you care about improving health, you have to care about reducing poverty. If you care about more productive workers, you have to think about how we can reduce poverty, because in all of those cases, no matter what you do in your social services, at root, this is something we're trying to tackle. Now, we don't have the business models to do that yet. We don't know how to do it, we don't know how to finance it, but that's what this book is about, is trying to figure out how do you finance cross-sector approaches to attack a root problem like poverty. And so what we're trying to do here is find a way to sort of these twin revolutions that are really taking the country by storm. One is to switch to outcomes, and the other, outcomes-based financing, and the other is population health. So increasingly, bigger and bigger proportions of the population are falling under these population health business models where you're paid per person per year to keep somebody healthy. And the minute that happens, it starts reorienting you to an outcomes orientation. So like I have Kaiser Permanente as my medical provider and my health insurer. And because they're both, their incentives are aligned. So the minute I walk in there in the fall and to get a regular checkup, someone's giving me a flu shot because they're managing my health because it's in their best interest to keep me healthy because that saves them money. So there's about $1 trillion spent every year on social services. There's about $1 trillion spent on chronic disease that's generated in low-income neighborhoods that could be avoided if we had gone upstream and solved problems like poverty in the first place. So to me, there's about $2 trillion on the table every year that we can reorient in the systems. But that requires people being able to sort of show that they can create the outcome that we're looking for. So that's what this panel is about. We have two people on the dais here who are going to talk to us a little bit about how they create value, how they improve people's lives so that that it helps solve somebody else's problem. You may be housing somebody, but the benefits may accrue to the health system, or the education system, or to these other systems. And they're really on the vanguard of trying to figure some of this work out. Now, I am not going to read their bios that's in your presentation here. I mean, in your forms. But I would just say, well, we have Carol Naughton, who's CEO of Purpose-Built Communities, and then we also have Wayne Carson, who is head of ACH Child and Family Services. Sorry, I should have remembered that. So we're going to start with a conversation with them about how they create value, how they solve other people's problems, how they sort of put their work into a larger frame of reference in a bigger paradigm. So I'm going to start with Wayne, and Wayne, maybe you just kind of tell the audience a little bit about what you guys do at ACH and just give us some background.
Great. So ACH Child and Family Services is a 103-year-old not-for-profit organization founded in 1915 with the goal of protecting children and preserving families. For a long time, we were an orphanage. We had 64 beds that kids could come to live in if they weren't able to live with their families. As the community changed, as we grew as an organization, we really wanted to look at better ways to impact the kids and families that are living in Fort Worth, Texas. So we've now evolved into a multi-service organization that has about 14 different options for kids if something is happening at home and they're not safe or not able to stay at home. And then 4 years ago, we dove head first into the world of performance-based contracting when the state of Texas identified that the foster care system in the state of Texas is very problematic and has been for a long time. The model, a performance-based model was designed. It was based on doing things more of a local level instead of having our government in Austin be parents for 30,000 kids all over the state, recognizing that solutions to these problems may look very different in Fort Worth, Texas than they look in Lubbock, Texas. And so in 2014, we started a performance-based contract to generate better outcomes in 7 counties in Texas in the foster care system. And we've been successfully implementing that for right at 4 years now.
That's great. And we're going to come back to you. I want to ask, how is that different than the way it was done before? It's a question I'll have for you. But before that, Carol, I want to ask you. So you're in the business of creating value. You're in the business of really improving lives. But you write about that in your chapter in the book. What if you can sort of tell us a little bit, what does it mean sort of for the work that you do to sort of be focused around outcomes, and how might you think of Wayne's organization as a way of achieving that goal?
Well, first, thank you. I'm so glad to be here at Baldwin College. I'm a huge fan. My daughter wears a We Over Me t-shirt 3 or 4 times a week. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm a fan of what Dr. Sorrell and everybody here is doing, so thank you for hosting us. I work for Purpose-Built Communities. We are a not-for-profit pro bono consulting group, and we help local leaders around the country create great neighborhoods that are designed to have broad, deep, durable pathways out of poverty for low-income families. We have a very clear model that includes high-quality mixed-income housing, a cradle-through-college education pipeline, and community health and wellness programs and facilities that create what one of my friends calls the quality of life infrastructure. And we think the secret sauce to this is what we call a community quarterback organization, which is almost always a newly created nonprofit who's not in the business of delivering services, but helping all of those other complicated, long-term cross-sectoral partnerships really be excellent at what they do and creating great outcomes with and for the community. And that's how Wayne and I met 5 or 6 years ago on a project in Fort Worth at which ACH is one of the anchor, really one of the fundamental anchors in this neighborhood community. We started our work at Purpose-Built in a project in Atlanta in the Eastlake neighborhood 23 years ago. I've been working on that project in one way or the other for 23 years. So I was a child when we started. And I say that because breaking the cycle of poverty is not something we're going to do in a 3-year grant cycle. It's long-term, committed work. It's figuring out how we build permanent affordability in a mixed-income environment, figuring out how we create great schools that will, as Michael says, create kids who can get those great jobs and make a lot of money, right? So that's what we try to do. The community quarterback in Eastlake is, I think, the most important innovation in our work that we've been involved in. Because everything else that we're doing, lots of other people have been doing, great schools, great housing, health and wellness. People are doing that all over the country. And some of it doing it really well. But the community quarterback with the focus on excellence and excellent outcomes in this whole work, I think, is what redefined our work and distinguished it from what some other folks have been doing around the country. So this idea of excellence and the idea of not just being satisfied when you've got a number of kids in early learning, for example. That's great, we want them in early learning, but how many of those young people, how many of those little geniuses are ready for kindergarten and the next phase? So we're looking at those, not just the numbers of kids, but are they meeting the milestones along the way that will get to the outcomes? We like to think of it that our neighborhoods are producing healthy, economically mobile young people. Young people who will have access to any kind of job they want because they can compete with anybody else in the world, who will be healthy, who will be ready to take the world, who will view the world as their oyster. And so working with organizations like Wayne, who are so good at what they do, finding best-in-class partners, like Wayne's organization, who can provide some of those services in a way that makes sense for that community. And to Wayne's point, not wanting to do the same thing in Atlanta or as in Fort Worth, as in Dallas, as in Portland. It's going to look different every place because we want to build on the strengths of local organizations and allow them to have both the resources and the opportunity to really thrive.
So Carol and Wayne, so the way the world is run in silos that have budgets and they pay for outputs. So how is it that you shifted to performance-based contracting? How is it that you sort of who pays for the quarterback? How does that function get funded? How did you guys switch into this sort of more outcomes-oriented sort of approach to the work that you're doing earlier, before, and the book wasn't even written yet, so I don't even know how you figured it out. So I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, I would say from our perspective, the East Lake Foundation, which is a community quarterback in Atlanta, was started by a private sector business guy who had been a philanthropist for a long time. So I think he brought a private sector orientation to it. And so he was thinking about, well, how do you build in economic sustainability? And we didn't do it perfectly by any stretch of the imagination, but we were thinking, well, if we can embed this community quarterback in real estate transactions, because they're helping to create part of the value here, they should share in the cash flow from these new development opportunities. So the development of the new apartments, the grocery store, all those kinds of things that would throw off some cash some of that would go to the community quarterback to help sustain it long term. We also do, really traditional fundraising. We go after competitive grants in that regard. But in the East Lake neighborhood, again, this is the value of having, for-profit people on your team. There was a historic golf course in the East Lake neighborhood called the East Lake Golf Club. It's where Bobby Jones learned to play golf. It was in bankruptcy and it was about to be sold on the courthouse steps when one of the members of that club, who loved it, called Tom Cousins, who's the philanthropist who started our work, and he said, I know you love golf. I know your foundation is already investing in the East Lake neighborhood. Wouldn't you be interested in buying this club? Because if you don't, the only other buyer is a landfill. And so 200 acres in this residential neighborhood could have been turned into a landfill. And so Tom bought that golf club, donated it to his family foundation with two conditions. The first was that the club be restored to its former glory in honor of Bobby Jones and Alexis Sterling and these other great golfers. But more importantly, that the cash throw-off from the operation of that club would come back to support the community revitalization. And over the last 20 years, it's thrown off about $40 million to support neighborhood revitalization that stays right there in the community, to support early learning, to support the East Lake Foundation, to support college scholarships, all those kinds of things. So, it's a social enterprise more than outcomes-based financing, but it's starting to move how the nonprofit world thinks about sustainability and funding.
So it's interesting, it's sort of a change in mindset, change in paradigm, and a little bit of flexible capital that helped make that transition.
Yeah.
Wait, how did you make the transition?
The transition to the foster care project was really based out of a desire, frustration that they working in a system that wasn't working, and an opportunity to do something about it. So this contract was structured in a way that some of the fundamental problems in the system could be addressed. And one of the problems was nobody was accountable. There was, if you didn't have enough foster homes, if you had kids that had too many behavior problems and nobody could take them, there wasn't anybody whose job it was specifically to fix that and to do something about it. Our contract, the buck stops with us. I mean, we are fully accountable for providing services for every child in our 7 counties. So, it was an opportunity to do something about it. There was, the contract was structured with risk passed to us, which was scary, but opportunities to be innovative and to do things we hadn't been able to do before. And it was something that we thought we could do well because it's about engaging the community. And we call our project Our Community, Our Kids, because we really believe the secret sauce is to quit thinking about these kids as foster kids and start understanding these are our kids. They live in our community, they go to our schools, they play on our soccer teams. And so the opportunity was exciting. It was a big challenge because we hadn't done it before. The state didn't really understand how to do a performance-based contract. And then the interesting part about working with Carol and part of the Renaissance Heights project is Foster care is designed to be a temporary solution. It's just supposed to be a temporary place to keep kids safe until we can get them back with the family. And I don't know if you know, but we just recently passed a law in Texas that makes it illegal to take a child away from their family just because they're poor. I mean, people think that kids should be taken away from poor families, and so we do not believe that. We believe that kids need to be with their families and need to be with their relatives. Foster care keeps them safe, but one of the huge barriers to helping kids return back to their family is safe and affordable housing, is quality education, is a neighborhood where they can be safe and can be a part of a viable neighborhood. And so the opportunity to be a part of this project was a very exciting beginning of ways to look at some real long-term solutions to this, and not just do foster care better than anybody else has ever done it, but to do it in the shortest amount of time that anybody's ever done it, so that we can get kids back to their families.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to ask you both to discuss a little bit, but explain the Renaissance Heights project and how you guys are working together, and how an outcomes orientation might guide some of the architecture around that effort. But before we get there, Carol, I want you to talk about violins and obesity.
Okay. Violence and obesity.
Was it Rosanna Dennett talking about?
Oh, yeah.
What is this about violins on television? That's an old
It was. Those of a certain age will remember that. That's right. When I started working in the East Light neighborhood in 1995, almost all the children were overweight. And when we opened our school in 2001, and kids started coming back after being off campus while the housing was being rebuilt, again, almost all the children were overweight. And I say this as somebody who has struggled with their weight every day of her life. But everybody was overweight. And now if you come to East Lake, you don't find a child who's overweight. And David asked me about that once, and he said, well, what kind of program did you have? I said, well, we taught the children to play the violins. And my point is, we did not have an anti-obesity program. We've never had an obesity program. We've created a lot of smart opportunities for people to make good decisions that collectively have created better health for children. So all those decisions from, number one, starting with the idea that we were going to have a mixed income community. Number two, that there would be sidewalks that would be well lit where people could walk. That everybody would walk to school rather than taking the bus. That everybody in the school would get recess every day, and that children would get PE 3 times a week. That we moved from doing fish fries and donuts as our fundraisers to something else. That the meals that were served in the community were healthy. That there was a Publix grocery store who came in with access to good, healthy food. And fundamentally, when you come to the community, it is so different now. Now, I didn't think to weigh the 4th graders in 2001. I wish I had, because I think it would show that if the 4th graders weighed X in 2000, they would weigh X minus 25% today. And so again, it's all of these opportunities for kids and families to live rich, full lives that create these health outcomes that we didn't expect to see. And in fact, if you had asked us when we first started if we were in the health business, I would have said, oh no, we're community developers. Now if you ask me if we're in the health outcomes business, hell yeah, we're community developers. Because we realize now in a very important way how these things are connected.
So I think this is such a great example of, the essence of the paradigm of switching to outcomes is that you solve someone else's problem. And treating somebody with type 2 diabetes over their life course costs $1 million, and a violin costs $100. So you got to be thinking, who am I saving money for? Who am I helping? What system is benefiting from this intervention? Now, I'd like both of you to talk a little bit about your project. Explain to the group and how the outcomes orientation sort of helped you design it. But as you are doing that, I'd like you and the audience to start thinking about some questions you have for these two about how they made this transition, how the practicality of getting it funded, of dealing with foundations, of dealing with other service providers. How do you sort of keep a coalition together? I have lots of questions for them, but I'd like to hear what questions you have. So let's talk about Renaissance Heights.
Would you like to describe it, or would you like me to jump in?
The Renaissance Heights project. So I'll start with our role, and then you can. So it's a 200-acre campus that was a private school for 100 years. Private school closed, And a developer bought the property and saw, luckily we had a great developer who saw an amazing opportunity to do something with a fresh piece of canvas. The neighborhood is fascinating as well. In the 30s and 40s, it was a very solid middle-class neighborhood in Fort Worth. We had our golf course too. We have a golf course that Byron Nelson learned to play golf on, and so you can't one up Texas on that one. But the developer, so the developer had a plan for some retail development, some housing, and then he had this 20-acre campus of historic buildings that he didn't know what to do with. And so started looking for a partner, talked to some colleges, talked to some hospitals, and we crossed paths and proposed to him how we could use and renovate these 1925 buildings into allowing us to expand the scope of services and the quality of services that we were able to deliver. So we actually had 20 acres and 10 buildings donated to us in order to begin redeveloping those buildings, and we were the first ones out there basically, and that kind of, I think, helped start a little bit of the momentum for all of the retail that came next. We now have 140 apartment units. We have our children's hospital has built a clinic. Our YMCA is building a new Y. Our community, our college, Texas Wesleyan College, is right up the street. They've been an amazing partner in looking at how to integrate what they do into our services. So the synergy is just very exciting about how things are starting to come together. It's still a work in progress. We still have about 100 acres that's not developed, so that's planned for more residential, but very exciting.
Purpose Built was invited to that project after Wayne's organization had already moved out and already started the renovation of the old school to provide a really cool campus for ACH. We were invited by two of the folks who were investors in the property, and you all will appreciate this. They bought that 200 acres in 2006 at the top of the market, and then suddenly it was 2007 and 2008 and 2009, and the value of the property was going down, and it was hard to think about how they could finance anything new in a part of town where there hadn't been any new development really in about 45 years. And they were listening to a book on tape. They were listening to Tom Brokaw's, one of his books, and he was talking about East Lake and Purpose Built. And they were in upstate New York on the Northway. If any of you been up there, and they pulled over on the side of the road and pulled us up on their phones and called us that afternoon. And what we were able to do is help them and some of their partners think about how they could work together in an effective way. I think one of the coolest things that the team was able to do together, so we had nonprofits who were interested in being in this space. ACH was already there. Cook Children's Healthcare wanted to do a clinic in the neighborhood. The Y was already in the neighborhood and wanted to do a new building and was willing to think about doing that new building on their space. The city wanted to fund a new pool that the Y could manage. There was a new charter school that was like K-5 and wanted to go through K-12. But there was no new residential that was part of it. And everybody recognized that all of their organizations would be more effective if the people that they served had access to better housing. And so they met with a couple of developers, invited one developer to come in, and the developer was a for-profit, mixed-income developer, knows how to do this really well, but it was the nonprofits who organized and went up to Austin 4 or 5 times to advocate with the State Housing Finance Agency about the importance of this deal getting the right financing from the state. So think about this, 4 or 5 well-respected nonprofits going to the State House and to the State Housing Finance Agency to advocate for a for-profit developer to get the resources they needed to build the housing. And I say that as an example because it demonstrates that in our work, we're really agnostic as to people's tax status. We just care that they're really good at what they do. And I think that's part of the orientation of thinking about the outcomes that we're trying to get to and not just the process. Not just we need to have a bunch of affordable units. We want to have great quality housing that will create a platform for families across a broad range of incomes to be able to take advantage of all these other programs and work their way up the food chain.
That's really helpful. So I have a bunch of questions for them about the project. I didn't realize how important golf was to this whole effort. But I'd like to hear what you have to say. I'm afraid we don't have mics we can run around, but we are, but if you can just, I want to take 4 questions as a burst and then have them respond. So why don't we go ahead and raise your hand. We'll start here. You let us know who you are and ask your question, and then we'll go to the second one in the back there.
Thank you very much. You talked about 200 acres, and then you subdivided it. You talked about 200 acres, and then it was subdivided into some 20 acres. You talked about control of the housing market for a particular group of people, which is very, very crucial in terms of development for people and creating some type of stable environment. How long do you control that housing? And what about some of the other factors that go into making a viable and effective family, such as education, employment, those kind of things? Because I guess you get a pretty good return on the investment. Somebody mentioned $40 million, and that ain't no peanuts.
Yeah, a great question. The one in the back, and anybody else? We'll come back up here for a third one, and a fourth over here. So we've got our four, and then I'll put it back to you two.
Hi, Clyde Valentine at SMU Meadow School of the Arts. Run a center called Ignite Arts Dallas. Folks speak purpose place. This question is for Carol, specifically on the development side. Mixed income. Can you just unpack that a little bit more for us? What specifically you mean in terms of sort of the economic considerations? And you have research thus far on the benefits of developing that way that you can share with us.
Great questions, Bill. You guys are getting ready, right?
I'm
You're
trying to
getting ready.
remember, but my
Okay.
memory is.
Third question here, and then we'll go to one fourth question.
Hi there, my name is Sagar Desai. I work for the Commit Partnership in Dallas, and I guess as we're talking about outcomes-based financing and changing outcomes, how are we really going to systemically change outcomes if we aren't also talking about systemic racism and the role that that plays a part in creating poverty and looking at who's at the table when we're making decisions for communities and on behalf of communities, because when we're talking about solving the root cause of poverty, a large part of that, almost all of it, is systemic racism.
Okay, you just hand that over to your colleague here. They're perfect.
Hello, my name is LaShera Walker, and I'm with St. Philip's School and Community Center. And when you talked about the state finance housing agency and those nonprofits coming together to be advocates on that behalf, how did that look as far as the funding for the actual families? And was that something that went partnered with the city? How did that relationship look to where it trickled down and the families were able to benefit from that?
Great questions. Thanks to the audience for that. Who wants to start here? And I'm happy to help.
Help us remember. Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's start with the last one first. So
Okay.
so funding, and I think it's a really important part of this story too, that there's a policy component to that. We haven't talked about that as much, but that's really critical.
So thank you. Do you know Becky Metal, who is now working with? So she was the person who kind of organized all of those nonprofits to go up. Becky, who used to work for Uplift Charter School, now works for St. Philip's. So what they went up to advocate for was for the resources to build affordable housing in a mixed income environment. And so they needed to get an award of 9% low-income housing tax credits that could be used to build this mixed income housing to create permanent affordability for families between 50 and 60% of area median income. So the resource stays in the building, it's in the capital stack of the building, and it's an important way to be able to deliver affordable housing that will remain affordable for 30 years at this stage of the game, and we anticipate that it will remain affordable beyond that, but there's a 30-year restriction that comes along with that. So I'm kind of answering two of those questions at once. The other thing that when we talk about mixed income housing, we really are true believers in delivering affordable housing in a mixed income environment. We know concentrating people in poverty does not create great outcomes for anybody. I mean, that's proven, right? We know that. I heard a doctor say not long ago that living in concentrated poverty is like breathing polluted air. The longer you do it, the worse it is for you. So we start there. And when we talk about mixed income, we're almost always talking about a rental community, and there may be a home ownership strategy as well, but a rental community that serves families. Ideally, we would say 1/3 really deeply subsidized. Families who are subsidized through the public housing program or Section 8 or project-based rental assistance. so you can serve families below 30% of area median income. And then a tax credit tranche, which serves families between like 50 and 60% of area median income. And then the last third, we'd love to see true market rent, whatever the market will bear, with an expectation that over time, as the neighborhood becomes more successful, the schools are performing well, you will attract some higher income families into those units, which means you will also attract neighborhood serving retail, grocery stores, restaurants, the kinds of things that every neighborhood wants, but are dependent upon both density and some of the families in that neighborhood having enough expendable income to support those businesses. So that's kind of how we think about mixed income. That's how we advocated up in Texas. I want to give a shout out to the Uplift Charter School people who are the education partners in the Renaissance Heights project. They made a real key policy change. Want to think about what these policy levers are, both at the state and state government level, but also within organizations. They made a policy change that prioritized attendance for kids who lived in these new mixed income apartments, to make sure that kids who moved into this neighborhood, into these new housing, and people who lived in the surrounding neighborhood would have the first priority to go to this school, as opposed to just saying kids in 2 or 3 zip codes would be able to go. So really a way to attract people to the neighborhood and housing that was newly built across incomes, and a way to have access to a great education outcome. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Let me speak to the systemic racism question. We obviously need leadership that is representative of the community on our board. And in this community, the faith communities are very strong, and we have a very vocal, strong pastor of one of the faith communities who is on our board. We also have some very strong neighborhood associations who are involved. So decisions are being made with them at the table, with us at the table together, not them at the table, but us at the table together, so that the voice of the community is being heard. The leader of the faith community did the blessing for the very first ground opening. It was just an amazing bringing the bones back out of the ground to life. And the thing,